Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Talk With Kiet podcast, where we connect people, ideas, and capital to help make a difference in the world. Today, I am on with Someera Khokhar. Someera is the founder and CEO of Namu 21. Someera and I will explore her extensive career and entrepreneurial journey, as well as how to build a digital ecosystem for the credit market. Someera, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Kit. It's so great to be here. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for agreeing to do this. This is going to be amazing, and people are going to love your story, and people will learn a lot from this conversation. I can tell. And so, as part of tradition, we usually start with the origin story of how an entrepreneur got to where they are now. And so, Someera, what is your story? How do you end up, becoming the CEO of a company that you founded called Namu 21?
So it's a great place to start, Kit. And I would say that the Namu story really has three limbs to it, three parts of a stool. The first is basically I can take you back to my life pre-double digits of age, where I, like most sort of first-generation immigrant stories, I lived in a multi-generational home. And my primary caretakers were my grandparents. And my grandfather, whom I had a huge deal of respect, fear, loyalty, you find that adjective for, he had embarked on a project to map the Quran. He wasn't necessarily a particularly religious man per se, but he was in many ways an iconoclast and was quite an academic. And so I grew up with him surrounded by books and dictionaries, and somebody who spent the early hours of every day basically using multiple pens and colored pencils to literally count the number of letters and words and punctuation in the Quran.
Wow.
Because his sort of perspective was that within all of the stories and the surahs of the Quran, there was a code and there was a pattern, and he was determined to find it. And so that was his life's work. And so that was sort of part one of the Namu story. And for those folks who've worked with me and continue to work with me know that I am up in the early hours like the larks, and I work in those early hours because that sort of time frame of working and doing things, around intricate deconstruction was something I learned from age dot. So that's part one of the Namu story.
So you sent me an email this morning at 4:30 a.m. So now that makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm up every day at 3:45.
Yeah.
And that's something I have done without fail for more years than I can remember. And it's not in any way negatively impactful in my life. It's something I actually get a lot of joy from, because I have this period of time before the rest of the world wakes up where I just have the ability to think and to read and to explore all of the interesting things that are happening in the world and things that I like to focus in on, which is just an opportunity that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily have because you're in the day-to-day grind otherwise.
No, that's right.
So that's sort of part one of the Namu story. Part two of the Namu story is basically having grown up with all of these books and not necessarily being the most socially adept person as I was growing up. I, in my school years, became an assistant school librarian. So I spent, when everybody else was outside playing games in the playground, I was filing away books. And so if you don't know, books and how books are organized across libraries is basically structured through the Dewey Decimal System, which is an entire structural classification around book sectors, sort of like thematics, and then book types. And then within those, you have lots and lots of subcategories. And it's all basically standard 10, right? Everything is in stacks of 10. And so I learned that system. And so, this entire background of mapping complicated theological texts combined with IDs of books and themes of books and categorizations. Fast forward to the financial crisis of 2008, where the example that I lived through was basically having to collateralize approximately 384 wrapped transactions in the space of 31 days, right? And in that period, recognizing that the only way to understand what was happening in those documents, you needed to have a schema.
That's right.
And I sort of delved into my past to build that schema around how do you classify large component parts of data? How do you extract and organize it? How do you ID it? And that's the Namu story. Because if you fast forward to what we've built and what we have on our interfaces right now, it's series of connected, classified, hierarchical data elements. And that's the story that helped me figure out that, from 350 pages of what seems to be disconnected free flow text, within that there is a remarkable amount of structure. You just have to find the pathways.
So it's pretty much your brain in code is what that much one.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say just my brain. We have a fantastic team. There's 15 of us in total, and the way that I describe us is that we may be small, but we are mighty. So it is the collective brainchild of multiple people that contribute to what we've built and what we continue to build, right? Which is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I look at our platform, and obviously I broke the Kool-Aid. I look at our platform and I'm amazed. It's phenomenal.
So before we get into that, let's go backwards a bit.
Yeah.
You were at White & Case for over a decade, right? For a very long time.
That's right.
And you rise to the rank and became partner.
That's right.
And then you just gave all that up to start Namu?
That's right.
What were you thinking? What was in your head when you going through that decision?
So look, I mean, I had a remarkable career at White & Case, right? Yeah. I worked with phenomenal people. I was given opportunities to, do things and lead projects and lead teams and build teams that I, never thought that I would ever have the opportunity to do, right? So it was a phenomenal period of growth in my career. But I got to a point where I realized that there was much more that I wanted to do, and that I had interests and ideas that were beyond being a partner in a very successful law firm. And that those ideas and that sort of exploration that I wanted to do needed a new format. And so, I made the very tough decision to sort of leave what I had built at the firm and look to do something different. Now, at the time, a lot of people, questioned my sanity, including members of my own family. But the way that I sort of saw it was that it was merely another extension of what I was doing at White & Case, which was basically building something and looking to take it to market. And if you think about, certainly in the positions that I had at White & Case towards the latter part of my career, we were building teams, building new service lines effectively and taking that to market. And so this is what I was looking to do, but in a different context. And also having the ability to do something from scratch, right? Where there's a complete white piece of paper or a white screen, and the ability to rethink and explore and consider new ways of developing solutions for a market that I was extraordinarily familiar with and a market that I had a deep sense of connectivity to. So it didn't feel that it was that big of a jump. And also, look, I mean, my bottom line was as if I failed, and I'm very used to failing in my life. And so, the inherent failure doesn't scare me, but my sort of general philosophy was, well, if this idea didn't necessarily come to fruition, that I could always go back to being a lawyer, like a traditional lawyer.
Yeah. But you took a different approach to starting a company like most people, though, right? Most people say, I have an idea, I'm going to pull a team together. I'm going to raise money from investors before I take a leap of faith. You actually start and build this with your own money.
That's right. That's right. Look, I mean, also, look, I was in a fortunate position to be able to do that, right? I was at the point in my career where I had the ability to do that, and I had a supportive family, which allowed me to do that. But my view generally was that I needed to get the product and the idea mature enough so that people could really understand the value proposition that I was bringing to the market. Because oftentimes when you're thinking about a way of transforming an existing process and creating new value from that transformation, people have to see it, right? They have to really be able to touch it. And so I wanted to build the platform to the point where the value proposition and the ability to touch it, the ability to see it was present. And so that was, the view that I took. And look, I also recognized even at that time that fundraising is tough, right? You hear the positive stories in the press about, multiple millions of dollars being raised, but I think you and I and many people who are listening to this would generally agree that fundraising is not for the faint-hearted. And so what I didn't want to do in those initial months and years of thinking about the product was to spend the time focused in on fundraising, when actually what was much more, I thought, important, and I still believe is important, was to build out as much of the product as we could to then enable that fundraising process to become much more of a component part of the time that I was directing my attention to.
No, and now, I don't want to speak out of school, but people are begging to invest in you now, given you have an amazing business.
From your lips to God's ears, please.
That's right. Well, let's further zoom back, because if people don't know you, they think you grew up with money. You grew up in a very posh environment. That's why you speak so well and eloquent. Like, talk about your upbringing.
That's an interesting question. You're right. A lot of people who don't particularly know me very well make certain assumptions, which are all fair. Everyone makes assumptions, but my background is one of, which I think I alluded to at the beginning of the session, right, is one of a very traditional immigrant story, right? So I grew up in the 1970s in a city called Bristol in England. And I can tell you right now that 1970s Bristol is nothing like 2023 Bristol, right? It was, and within the city, I grew up in effectively what in the US you would call public housing. So in a environment which was challenging, right? Resources were challenged. I grew up in a home where 13 people shared one bathroom, which at this point, when I try to describe that to my daughter, is beyond her comprehension, right? And also that bathroom was outside, right? So very, very different ecosystem. And it was multi-generational, and access to books and education certainly wasn't encouraged for me because I was a girl. And so, part of what I did in those early years was read a lot of the books that were available, which were primarily Arabic or in Farsi, so not necessarily in English. I read those in secret because it wasn't something that was necessarily encouraged for, somebody who was basically a girl, right? The gender disparity that I grew up in was quite significant. But then fast forward, my father was somebody who had a lot of get up and go, and he was very tenacious. He never took no for an answer. And so he, made a lot of decisions in his life which transformed my life. And as a consequence of decisions that he made, and meandering paths that he took, we ended up in Hong Kong. And so I moved to Hong Kong when I was just about to hit 12. And at that point, my life changed. because that was the first time in my life that I went to a school where there was access to materials, right? There were books, there were teachers that were present, there was availability, and I say this in all candor, availability of resource, right? Because if you've grown up in certain environments, and I see this right now, even in New York, right, where there aren't enough materials in the classroom, it's very difficult to learn. So that changed my life. And, having access to all of that basically allowed me to really take advantage of the learning, which I did, right? I was very academic. I loved books. I worked in the library. And that academic interest then sort of propelled me into spending a lot of time trying to convince my family that, I wanted to go to college. And that again was, not necessarily something that immediately was going to be available to me. Because again, I'm the first woman in my family that went to college.
Yeah.
Again, just to sort of add further context to this, my mother was a goat herder. So my life, where I sit right now, is dramatically different to where I started. But all of that is really a testament to so many people around me that allowed me to take opportunity, allowed me to take the steps that I wanted to take. And don't get me wrong, it's not that I didn't push, and I never take no for an answer, as I think you've heard me say a number of times. But without certain folks very actively helping me move forward, my life could have been quite different.
Yeah. But also it sounds like it's about how you manage the no's in life to help you get somewhere in life, right?
That's right. And I have my general mantra on a no is no to me always means no, not right now. It's
That's
never
right.
a no, right? And so it's the ability to not take the negative and accept it, right? My general philosophy on life is if you want to do something or be somebody, then you have to push. You take all of the support and the resources around you to help you, but in the end, it's your own velocity which is going to drive you. And so don't lose that velocity.
Yeah, because the reason why I'm trying to get all this context is your background history positions really well for now 21 and what now 21 was embarking on, because you're embarking on an industry that's been used to doing things on certain ways for a very long time. And what you're doing is actually make their lives a lot easier, better, but you're gonna hear no for an answer for a very long time until they realize that, right? So talk to us a bit about that journey around digitizing the credit market.
Yeah, look, I mean, ultimately, as you said, right, the platform is designed to create significant efficiencies in workflow, make the people that are in the ecosystem touching the instruments quicker, faster, better, give them bionic powers of insight and speed, right? So all of the component parts that, again, will drive their own efficiencies and knowledge in that workflow. But helping people move through change is part of what I think my role is as we think about NAMU penetrating the broader market ecosystem. Because what we're looking to build and what we're developing is a market utility. It's a way in which different stakeholders across the ecosystem can more effectively communicate what's happening in that transaction, right? And it's that synthesis of language which is required. So, for example, someone may classify a particular suite of provisions in a particular way, and somebody else may classify them in a different way, but it's the same provision. The net effect is the same, right? So what we're doing is we're building that synthesis of language so the communication flows can be significantly improved. But that's a journey, right? So much of what you are looking to do, or what I'm looking to do as we talk about the platform, and as we bring the platform to market and increase the market penetration that we have, is about helping people work through that challenge of, I've always done it this way, so therefore, A, it's the only way. There can't possibly be a better way. And even if there was a better way, I'm not sure that it's worth my while trying it, right? So those are hurdles which require, in my view, a great deal of resilience to the no, and tenacity to that no, but also empathy for the fact that change is hard, right? Because you're basically saying to not just one person or two people, but you're saying to groups of stakeholders, this is a new way that the roles that you play within this ecosystem can be materially improved, but ultimately not just improve, but help you create new value, right? Because ultimately, if you can digitize data elements coming out of a loan, your ability to create new value from that instrument is exponentially increased. Because at the moment, the data within a single instrument travels in the same direction as that instrument. And one of the things that we talk about, and we spend an awful lot of time thinking about as a company, is once you detach the data out of the instrument, that data has its own life. It has its own direction of travel. It has its own velocity. And there are ways and means in which you can start to rethink entire financial instruments around the detached data from the underlying instrument. So how traditionally the market would wrap transactions, right? I mean, there was an entire market on wrapping financial instruments. You can rethink that because you can now start to wrap potentially the data instead of the instrument.
No, that's right. And for the audience benefit, right? So we talk about the institutional leverage loan market, where there's a credit agreement that guides the structure of that loan. And for the life of me, that credit agreement is touched by so many people to get an output. And even the people that put the deal together, they end up not having the data. So they end up having teams to then in the back office to type in the details of the deals for the credit agreement that they actually created.
Right.
That to me sounds insane, right? But with a standard like NAMU, everything is already code-based. The second the deal is print, the data is in the database.
That's right. So the APIs move the data elements and the data fields into different processing systems. And because it's ID data and it's normalized and it's harmonized, that single API can run across multiple different systems internally and externally and create that velocity, which obviously then drives liquidity, drives trading, and hopefully over time reduces the cost of capital.
No, I totally agree. But I guess in terms of people that are going a similar journey as you are, trying to convince the world that there's a better way to do something, right? What are some of your tips on how to approach in terms of changing an industry behavior?
Patience.
Lots of it.
Lots of patience, empathy, but critically, a resilience to the no, right? If for every no, you have to take the strength and the drive that comes from the yes, right? So you can have 100 no's before you get your one yes, but those 100 no's shouldn't deter you from the pursuit of the yes. And look, I mean, being realistic, again, as a small company, it's time, right? All of this is time, because institutions and market stakeholders have time. Small companies like ours don't necessarily have the same amount of time. The good news for us is that we also have very patient investors. So a shout out to all those folks that have invested in NAMU 21. We have patient investors, and we have strong investors that believe in what we're doing, and recognize that changing an ecosystem is not going to happen overnight. It's going to require a maneuvering of different component parts, which are in large part product-based, but also in large part based on the ability to recognize where the value chain falls and how the value chain can be penetrated to incentivize that shift, right? And so that's all part and parcel of the broader advice, which is if you're looking to bring change, you have to recognize who's going to be incentivized to bring about the change, and then look to pursue them directly, but also look to pursue them through ancillary views as well, right? So you sort of do these small little pincer moves, which in isolation may look unconnected, but actually are very holistically connected, because you're maneuvering a group of stakeholders or a group of entities into a particular position.
Yeah. And so my curiosity is, how do you decide the team to pick to go down this journey with you?
You mean who are the
like how do you hire? Like how do you like what are some of the things you look for to find the right team with that tenacity that can go down this journey with you?
Yeah, look, I mean, I'll start off by saying that our team is extraordinary, right? We have an extraordinary group of individuals, and the majority of our team have been on the NAMU journey for well over 4 years, which for a small company like ours is remarkably long, right?
Yeah.
So that's a testament to the folks that we've got and the product that we're building as a collective, right? So what do we look for when we think about who's joining our team? First part is curiosity, right? Somebody who's interested in doing things that are new. Somebody who is interested in doing things that are extraordinarily hard, right? Nothing we do is easy. And I say that with the greatest amount of respect to every single member of our team, right? The way in which we have created our algorithms and the underlying engines that basically deconstruct the documents, that requires a great deal of I'm using my words carefully here, because I want to make sure that they're impactful enough. It's tough. And so you need an enormous amount of resilience, as well as curiosity, as well as ability. And what we look for is folks who want to do things that no one else has done before, and that there isn't a roadmap, and that we create the roadmap as we build our features. Now, we have a broad product roadmap, and we have component parts of our product that we are continuing to refine and expand. But each component part of our roadmap is a foundational element to the next part, right? So we think very carefully about what we sort of release and how we build a particular component part of our product. And those folks who are familiar with our platform will recognize this as I'm speaking about it. Each feature is either hierarchically connected to another feature, or it is hierarchically connected to another larger, greater feature. And it's all basically a series of building blocks, right? It's like a jigsaw puzzle. And so what we've done to date is we've built the underlying structure. So we've put all of the side pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together, right? So we've got our 4 corners, and we've built the side pieces. And what we are building now are all of the component parts that come together to build a full NAMU ecosystem. Because what we're building is an ecosystem, not a singular product.
No, that's right. Now, you mentioned earlier about your experience growing up as a woman. What's your experience now as a CEO founder, as a woman?
Look, I mean, the world has dramatically changed from the 1970s and 80s, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very different environment, which is positive. So the challenges facing, women, and certainly women who look like me, or who came from the background that I came from the 70s and 80s, is vastly different to where things are right now. But I don't think it's any surprise to anyone that being a woman in any industry and in any ecosystem has an inherent set of challenges. And so one of my sort of views generally, and obviously shaped by my experiences, is that I over-index on things that I know that, generally speaking, may not be as easy for me to do as somebody who is different to who I am, right? So somebody who is either a man or somebody who has a different color skin, all of that are challenges that I recognize, but I don't let them shape my decisions. But what I do is over-index on certain things. So, for example, one of the challenges that I had early on was, and still continue to, is that you're a lawyer. There's no way that someone like you could ever build a technology company, or there's no way anyone like you could ever understand engineering. So I just got smarter, right? I mean, I had a very interesting call yesterday with a very large credit fund, with their CTO. Yeah. And one of the first things he said to me was, "Are you a lawyer?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Oh, because you speak to me like you're a developer." Yeah. And that felt hugely gratifying, right? Yeah. So again, basically I taught myself fundamentals of engineering because I have to over-index on that, because I have to be able to walk into any kind of environment, whether it's a sales pitch, whether it's an investor pitch, and my bona fides, which will be questioned in a different way than perhaps somebody else who looks differently to me would be, I have to make sure that those bona fides are upfront and I've established that position. And then therefore, to allow the conversation to move in the direction I want it to move. Now, whether or not that's fair is a different question. I leave that to others to with much better background, with much better knowledge around that to make the determination. But I guess if I allowed myself to determine decisions based on fairness or otherwise, I perhaps wouldn't have got where I wanted to go to in life. So my view is that, there's certain things that you can do to change your paradigm, and that's in your control. And so that's what I can do.
Yeah. So pretty much don't be a victim, right?
Correct.
Set your own destiny and don't take no for an answer.
Yeah, and that's not to say that it's not hard, and it's not to say that different people come to it with their own views and their own opinions, and it's a very different experience for different people. But I do think that the more you believe you can control your destiny and that you believe that you can do things, the more you will.
No, that's right. And have you had moments where you're just like, maybe I should give up?
No. None. I absolutely believe in what we do. And I also love what we do, right? I think we have a phenomenal product. I work with a phenomenal team. I enjoy every interaction, no matter how hard, with investors, with clients. And believe me, they're hard. There are moments of despair, but there's never a moment where I wouldn't want to be doing this. That's not even in the equation. But I enjoy it hugely. It's a combination of curiosity, creativity, intellectual horsepower, all of which drive me. And so hugely enjoyable.
No, that's awesome. Well, Someera, thank you so much for being on today. That was extremely insightful for the audience. As part of tradition, where we end the podcast is, how can the community help you? What are the type of people you want to connect with, and what kind of help you'd love to get from the community?
Well, look, firstly, thank you for having me. This has been tremendous. And kudos to you, Kit, for setting up these podcasts. Like I said to you a couple of times, this is amazing. So
thank you.
I appreciate this opportunity. In terms of a broader outreach of assistance, the key ask is follow us on Twitter. We at NAMU21, we have a number of product launches that we will be looking to inform folks about on our Twitter channel. Follow us on LinkedIn. And to the extent that your day-to-day touches on syndicated loans, bilateral loans, and you are active in the private credit sector, get in touch with us. We're doing some super interesting things and looking forward to working with as many folks across the ecosystem as we possibly can.
Fantastic. Thank you, Someera. And thank you, everyone, for your continued support. Next week, we're going to have Matt Obers on. Matt is the data guru that everyone knows. And Matt is currently the general partner at Social Leverage. And we'll talk about investing in data businesses. So thank you, everyone. Have a good week.
Thanks.
Thank you.